G'day legends, it's time for our 4th edition of Viewer Mix Reviews. So if you haven't watched one of these videos yet, basically it's a chance for you guys to send in mixes and for me to have a listen to them and offer any feedback that might hopefully help improve your mixes. So obviously with this kind of video, there's always going to be a bit of a disclaimer that mixing is very subjective, and if the things that I have to offer you don't really agree with, that's totally cool. You don't have to go and do those things. But if you feel like the feedback that I give is going to help improve your mixes, go give it a try and see how it turns out. So this first track was sent in by Maxwell. Let's check it out.
Saw God just the other day. Said sorry son, you can't come this way. I turn around with my back towards those shiny gates. On my way back down to earth, the devil said I'll take your soul first, but I bet if I show up he'll hide away. I just can't fit in, I'm too different. They say I'm messed up in my own head. Hollow eyes stare me down as I walk by, tearing up like what do you expect? Just the life of a reject. Main stage, yeah, I'm choking every time. Lobotomized by the flawless crowd, screaming out like what did you expect? Just the life of a reject. Met a girl, man, she was great. Diamond ring and a love that fell fate. That's what I thought, but she left me on our wedding day. A basket case, that's what I...
Alright, so this is pretty cool. Definitely going back to my roots of the pop punk vibe, which is really fun. And I do have a couple of little thoughts for this mix. So first thing I'm sort of thinking is the overall mix could maybe just use a tiny bit more excitement. So not a lot, but I just feel like it's lacking a little bit of openness.
I just can't fit in, I'm too different. They say I'm messed up in my own head. Hollow eyes stare me down as I walk by, tearing up like what do you expect? Just the life of a reject. Main stage, yeah, I'm choking every time. Lobotomized by the flawless crowd, screaming out like what did you expect? Just the life of a reject.
So I feel like that helps like the cymbals to come through and stay kind of present in the mix. In this kind of genre, like the cymbals are still pretty important to drive the song. Like it's kind of like pop punk, like the drums are punching along, rocking out. And yeah, you want that kind of brightness of the cymbals to still kind of carry. And I feel like we're losing the cymbals a little bit in the mix. So if you have a listen to that.
I'm messed up in my own head. Hollow eyes stare me down as I walk by, tearing up like what do you expect?
Yeah, I feel like it just helps it pop a bit more, gives a little bit more snap to the top of the drums. So this could be something that you could do on your drum bus, or maybe it's just like add it to your snare and your cymbals and just see how that feels. But I like the presence that's adding, and I like what it's adding to the vocal as well. So I feel like the vocal is a little dull as well. So I'm not sure, there's maybe a lot of de-essing or maybe like some soothe or something kind of going on the vocal that's sort of chilling out all the top end. But I think we need just like a little boost around 8K or 10K just to bring a little bit of air into the vocals, and it helps them sort of pop out in the mix a little bit better. I also feel like in the mid-range, somewhere around 500, 600 hertz, there is some sort of build-up maybe between the guitars and the vocals, and it's just, for a better word, like has like this kind of honky-ish kind of sound to it.
They say I'm messed up in my own head. Hollow eyes stare me down as I walk by, tearing up like what do you expect? Just the life of a reject. Main stage, yeah, I'm choking every time. Lobotomized by the flawless crowd, screaming out like what did you expect?
It's even more pronounced when you don't have that boost on the top end.
They say I'm messed up in my own head. Hollow eyes stare me down as I walk by, tearing up like what do you expect? Just the life of a reject.
So that's only like a 2 dB cut at around 608 hertz. And it's just in that region. There's just like this little bit of a build up. And I think that sort of just opens the mix up. And as well as we have that little bit of extra presence and air on the top end, then that's just going to help everything open up and shine a bit more. So just a couple other little thoughts, and this is mainly just to do with some levels. I think when you put those bells in there, they could be just turned up a little bit. I think it's kind of fun, and you know, you talk about wedding day and then the bells ring. I think you could definitely have those a little bit louder.
On our wedding day,
It's kind of a cheeky moment, and you could definitely bring those forward and it wouldn't hurt the mix at all. The other thing is, leading into the chorus, it sounds like there's a snare roll, but the snare gets kind of lost. So it sounds like an accented roll, something kind of like that, but I can mainly just hear. So whether there's like triggered drums happening on that, maybe you need to go in and play with the threshold of the trigger, so it's picking up those in-between rolls. Make sure you're using like a multi-velocity sample, or if the one you're using isn't, maybe just for that roll, just trigger those snares so that you get the multi-velocity sound on a different sample, and it won't really matter that much if you just have it a little bit lower and you can get that full snare roll happening. Otherwise, just turn up the real snare mic. I'm assuming there's maybe real drums in here of this, maybe not, I don't know, but if there is, just automate the snare mic up through that roll so you're still getting those big accents, but then you bring up the in-between hits, because it's just losing a little bit of power running into the chorus. I'd like to hear that snare roll just punch it in.
What did you expect? It's just the life of a reject.
So the gang vocals on The Life of a Reject, they sound really cool, but they sound a little bit subdued. I reckon you could easily push them forward a little bit and make them really pop, especially because that's kind of like the name of the song, it's the hook. And when I think of gang vocals, I do kind of think of them popping out of the mix a little bit more. So definitely don't be afraid to like bump that stuff up and get the gang really happening there. Sounds really cool. That's about it. Really cool song. Really like the mix. And I think just a couple little tweaks would just sweeten it up a bit. So this next song was sent in by Amelie and Rafi, and it's called Late Night Talks. Let's check it out. Okay, so it's a bit of a pop song, we can tell by everything that's happening so far. I do have some suggestions kind of like straight up. I feel like that electric guitar sound, something about it just sounds maybe a little too raw and kind of unprocessed, I guess, for like a pop kind of sound. There's something in the quality of that guitar that I don't really enjoy the sound of, and it's something to do with the high end. Kind of like a clunkiness to the high end in this guitar. I'm not sure what it is. It's just like the tone of the guitar. So this is just a little bit of a suggestion, and obviously take it or leave it. So if I was mixing this track, this is probably the kind of thing that I would do at the start, just because people have a pretty short attention span these days, and you kind of need to get into things happening pretty quickly. So I would probably have something like a low pass filter to kick it off. And then I'd have vocals hit there, and we're straight into the song. I feel like the double length intro with people's attention span these days can be like almost a skip moment. It shouldn't be, but that's just kind of where we're at. That's my thoughts on the intro, and just to kind of deal with that sort of unprocessed guitar sort of sound. Like, I know you've got delay and effects on there that sound really cool. It's just the actual tone of the guitar that I feel like there's just something about it that just sounds a little unrefined. And you could have that kind of filter sweep thing happening on the guitar, and you can still have that really cool vocal echo happening over the top without that being filtered, and then kind of bring it into the vocals, and you're up and you're going. And I think that would be a great way to start the song. Okay, let's keep going.
I want you, I want you, I want you to know that I like you, I like you, I like you the most.
That's a really nice vocal tone. I really like the way that her vocals are sitting in the mix. I love the air and the detail on the top end. It's got a nice balance, doesn't sound muddy at all. Really crisp and clear. So great job on that. And if you're watching, let us know what vocal mic you're using on there, because it sounds awesome.
I don't want you, don't want you, don't want you this close. 'Cause I'm scared that I'm not what you want.
So those little ad-libs between the second and the fourth line. It'd be really cool to hear that with a bit of a stereo effect on it, sort of like spreading it or kind of like smearing it a little bit in the mix. Everything's kind of like down the center at the moment, and that'd be a cool opportunity to kind of like create a little bit of space there on that particular effect. So whether you do that with chorus or micro shift, or maybe you just put like a ping pong delay on it that's kind of like a little bit louder so you can hear the delay moving around. Just a couple of ways that you could try and sort of spread that effect out.
I want some late night walk with some late night talks. Is there anyone who's just like me? I wanna see daylight when we say goodbye, and I can wait for the next time.
Okay, so I feel like there's maybe some levels that could be tweaked here. I think that kind of coming into this build up, that kind of clap sound, it's kind of like our snare, it could definitely be push forward a little bit more to kind of like really start ramping things up.
I want some late night walk with some late night talks. Is there anyone who's just like me? I wanna see daylight when we
So I know it kind of like fades in. I'd probably still like to hear that overall fade lifted, like everything just brought up a bit.
say goodbye, and I can wait for the next time.
That snare, it sounds way too quiet. Need to like crank that up so when the snare hits, it's just like smashes you. Coming into the drop, so it needs to be like impactful. When the drop hits, we're just lacking something in the low end, and it's like the kick doesn't have any punch. It's got a lot of sub, but it doesn't have any punch. I'm not feeling that kind of like thump in the chest that you'd expect from like a big bass drum coming in. It's all just really deep subby kick sound. So on any kind of smaller sound system or like, you know, phone speakers, small speakers, this isn't going to cut through very much. And, you know, you don't really expect sub stuff to come through on a phone speaker that much anyway. But it would be good to hear the kick have a little bit more punch. And most of that's going to be up around 100 hertz. When we have a look at this, it looks like 100 hertz is really missing from around this part of the mix. So it could just be like EQing the kick a little bit, or maybe picking another kick sample or blending another kick sample in with what's kind of already there. But have a listen to what it sounds like if we kind of bring 100 hertz up on what's already here. So you can hear that thump of the kick now. So obviously it's mudding things up a little bit because we're bringing everything up that's in that region. But if we brought that out in the bass drum more, it's going to have more impact and it's going to drive this section a lot harder. Even on this kick sample, it's kind of around 113 hertz in this kind of area. So if you were to kind of try and bring this out, that would be the place to look.
I want you, I want you, I want you to know.
So again, that clap could definitely be louder, just get that backbeat of the snare going in the groove. But otherwise, that's sort of my thoughts on the mix. I think it's a really cool song. I really like the direction it's going in. So maybe just kind of tweaking the intro if you think that's a good idea, and even getting that kick to punch harder in the chorus, bringing up those claps a little bit more, and playing with that sort of stereo effect on the ad-lib vocals that are in the background, just creating a little bit more interest there. But overall, a really nice mix, and yeah, definitely curious to know what mic you're using on her voice. Sounds great. If you guys want to support this channel, please check out the description link below. Using any of those affiliate links, stuff like Sweetwater, if you shop and buy your gear there, or any of the plugin companies down below, they make awesome plugins. Definitely go check them out. And if you use those links, a small commission comes back to the channel, and that really helps support the time that goes into making these videos. Also, there's a link to my website. Go grab some drum samples, check out a mix course. Any of that stuff is a massive support to this channel. All right, this next one is sent in by William. He sent me 2 tracks, but I had a quick listen to both of them. They were really cool, but this one really grabbed my attention. So we're gonna have a listen through this because I think this is pretty cool. vibe. I think that's sick. That's a really cool tune. There's only a couple little things I would suggest on that, but overall, I feel like you've got the balance really good. Like all the sounds are sitting pretty much where they should be. And all I would really suggest is the mix is maybe a little bit on the bassier side of things, and the balance of that is still all right. Like it still sounds good as it is. But I'd be curious to hear what it sounds like if we just kind of livened it up a little bit with a little bit of air on the top end. I feel like that sounded pretty nice. So bring in a little bit of air on the mix, maybe like on the drums especially. You could definitely try it across a range of sounds. It could even just be on your mix bus, just a little bit of a boost around 7.5 to 8K. I've got about 3.3 dBs there. I'm also feeling maybe a cut around 160 hertz. And this could just be like on your bass drum, like just kind of clear up a little bit of space here, maybe 1 to 2 dBs. And I feel like that's just going to open this mix up really nice. Yeah, I think it sort of brings out the side stick nicely, a little bit of extra brightness to the hats, just kind of opens the mix up in a really nice way. This is an area that kind of can get a little like boxy, I guess, sounding like in that 160 hertz. You can get a lot of things building up in this area and the mix can feel a little bit bloated down there. So I think the kick, having a little cut there, is going to help that. There's a couple nice little parts there, like these little musical bits. I feel like you could automate them out a little bit, like this little guitar bit. I feel like you could definitely push that guitar out like a dB or two. That little sort of like keys sound on the left there, same deal. Bring that out. A little bit of like call and response. And I feel like that's what you've got going on, but just emphasize it a little bit more. Yeah, that's about it really. So maybe just listen through, see if there's some bits that you can highlight, bring out those little lead parts here and there. And then if you think adding that little bit of extra presence helps, then try something like that. Maybe cutting a little bit of this away from the kick, see how it goes. Really cool track. Thanks for sending that in. Okay, this is our third mix, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, sorry, so I'm just gonna put it in writing on the screen so I don't butcher it. I'm also not sure how to pronounce the track name. Gnar? I don't know, something like that. But let's give it a listen. So straight up, the first thing I would do if I heard this being sent in for mastering particularly, I'd be thinking about putting some sort of compressor or doing some sort of cut to those high frequencies because the hats are really cutting through. There's a lot of air on those drums and it's just like a little bit too much. Got like a resonance in the cymbals there, a little bit of a whistle frequency. Okay, so it'd be worth tackling this frequency in your overheads. 4,266 hertz. It's just like a nice whistle frequency on one of those cymbals. Just a notch to get rid of that. Just pull it down. Don't have to like completely obliterate it. Just maybe even like 10 dBs down on that will sort of like fix it and bring it back into the cymbals. All right, let's jump ahead a little bit. Sounding cool. It's a bit scary. And then what do we got near the end here? So what I'm thinking is with those cymbals, we could easily do some sort of cut, like a high shelf or even like a low pass filter on the overheads or the drums and just kind of chill those out a bit. So even from maybe around like, sort of like 10 to 12K, maybe pulling that down around 6 dB. Just brings the hi-hats back into the drums a bit more. I feel like the cymbals are just too loud. I don't know if there's cymbal bleed maybe coming through on the snare. If you haven't kind of dealt with that, you might be getting excess cymbals there. So you could use something like Blackstone Audio Silencer. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Or you could use FabFilter Pro and B. There's a really great way to deal with cymbal bleed using that plugin as well. Definitely deal with that to get rid of as much of that cymbal bleed as possible. And then we kind of maybe just want to deal with these cymbals. In the mix, it just feels like around 2 to 4K, there's just a really big boost of like presence and brightness that's kind of a little bit harsh, and it's coming from the cymbals and the guitars and maybe even a little bit from the vocals. So I'd be thinking a cut kind of around 3.5K is sort of dealing with this kind of like upper mid kind of harshness. On the guitar, it feels like there's some presence that's just like a little overbearing. So it feels a bit nicer to me, like the cymbals are back in the mix now. And you know, that's not perfect. That's just kind of trying to show you where I think this issue is. You probably just need to dive into those elements like the cymbals and the guitars and just see what can be cut without making it sound too dull, but just enough to kind of like take away the edge. Even like low pass idea on the cymbals, you could low pass from maybe like sort of 15, 16K. You know, when I turn this EQ off, all I hear is cymbal resonance. It's just whoosh, just a really kind of annoying sound. That whistle comes through, all the harshness and brightness. When we have the EQ on, I'm focusing more on everything else, like the guitar, the vocals, the kick and the snare. I'm not thinking about all the brightness that's hitting me. Okay, so on the snare drum, it feels like there's just a little bit too much reverb. So I reckon you could dial that back, maybe use a shorter reverb and just a lot less of it, just so the snare's not kind of feeling like it's so distant from everything else. The kick feels like it's got a lot of sub in it, but not a lot of punch. So maybe compressing the kick a little bit. I know that using like an 1176 on a kick can bring back some of the mids and the punch to a kick. So I'd maybe try something like that, just kind of compressing it, maybe do it in parallel and just like bring that in and just see if you can bring back some mids and a little bit of punch to the kick, because all I can hear is like that rumbly sub sound, but I'm not hearing the actual impact of the kick. Just feels a little bit hollow. maybe like just pull the reverb back just a tiny bit on the vocals. I feel like you're going for a pretty natural drum sound in here, but it wouldn't hurt to blend in maybe a kick and a snare sample just to add a little bit more impact to them. And especially if you're getting a lot of cymbals and bleed stuff coming through, using a sample underneath doesn't have to be the main sound. You can just kind of have it underneath and blend it in. Can just help those drums impact a bit harder, and you don't have to push the EQ as hard because you might have the sample really snappy and bright, and that's going to give you the cut that the snare needs. And you won't have to push the snare mic as hard to bring out that top end EQ, which is bringing out a lot of cymbals. Yeah, I'd say just experiment with that stuff and see if that helps tidy things up a little bit. Thanks for sending the track in. Okay, this track comes all the way from Uganda, and this is from Muki Pro. So let's check this out. The song is called I Love You. Good vibes. This sounds great. I could definitely just put this on and listen to it and not really think about the production and just be like, this is a cool song. So I think you've done a really good job with the mix, and anything I kind of have to offer here is just kind of like if you feel like this would help improve it. The only thing I sort of noticed just then was when we got to that chorus and the vocals split out into left and right and we had that nice sort of wide vocal sound, it did start to sound like there was probably like a little bit too much going on around like 200 hertz in the vocals. I'm not sure if just having them double tracked and panned sort of accentuated that, because it sounded fine down the middle. But yeah, once it's panned out, I felt like the vocals are sort of just taking up a little bit too much space in the low mids.
I'm in love with you. I need you in my life. Oh no.
So let's chuck this on the side.
I'm in love with you. I need you in my life. Oh no. I love you, would you stay with me?
So I feel like that helps. I think when you pan those vocals out, it sort of begins to create some sort of build up. So maybe on that double tracked vocal effect, or if it's just an effect on a vocal that's spreading it, maybe it just needs a little cut around sort of 340 hertz, sort of in that area there seemed to be the sweet spot.
Oh no. I love you, would you stay with me?
And now it's not terrible, like it's not like it ruins the mix, but that's what my ears are drawn to. I'm like, oh, it's sort of like, that could be like notched down a little bit to just make the vocal just sit in there a bit nicer.
You really so lucky. You make me happy, and I'm running crazy because of you.
So this is probably the first thing I've heard that I feel like probably needs addressing, is like the male vocal is a little muddy sounding.
You really so lucky.
Just like these low mid-range is kind of like, just sounds a little cluttery here, and just like we're lacking a little bit of clarity on the voice. It could just be a matter of like some multi-band compression, or maybe like some dynamic EQ, maybe something kind of like spread it out over like sort of 500 hertz.
You really so lucky. You make me happy, and I'm running crazy because of you, babe.
So So almost got that sort of like speakerphony radio sound sort of being emphasized in the mids here. So having something to kind of pull this in, because it's probably not all the time, it's just like parts of the voice sort of like poke through and create this kind of like this muddy sound on the vocal. Having maybe multi-band compression or dynamic EQ will just kind of control it as it goes.
Baby, you really a thief because you were storing my heart. Kwagalaya, baby, I like your smile. Your pretty eyes they shine in my heart. Hey, yeah. Me happy and I'm running crazy because of you, baby. You really a thief because you were storing my heart. Kwagalaya, baby, I like your smile. Your pretty eyes they shine in my heart. Hey, yeah. Because of you, baby, you really a thief because you were storing my heart. Kwagalaya, baby, I like your smile.
So it feels like it needs a good amount of cleaning up there. So even if you did a little cut and then had some dynamic EQ, I feel like that would definitely help a bit. It's just whether there's some elements in the mix as well that might need like either side chaining or just like a little cut in this area to make space for this male vocal.
You really so lucky. You make me happy and I'm running crazy because
So I feel like that would help, whether that's sort of just mainly focusing on the vocal or just side chaining to some instruments and helping sort of duck that area in the mix. You could do that on a multi-band compressor that has a side chain feature. And yeah, that'll just help the male vocals sit in there a little bit nicer. That's pretty much it, man. Like I think really cool sounding mix, really good vibes. We just clean up those little two vocal things, like so the double track vocals in the chorus and then the male lead vocal. Sounds great. Thanks for sending that in. So this is our last one for this segment, and this track is called Friends, and it was sent in by Felix. So let's check it out. Dig the guitar tone.
I guess we really need to talk right now because I'm sorry what went down and that it was so embarrassing.
My initial thoughts is I don't like the snare sound, but the vocals sound great. Love the vocal sound. None of us maybe like there's sort of like too much upper mids in the snare, like around 2 kilohertz.
Tell you before, maybe should have, but didn't find the right moment.
I feel like maybe this area of the snare drum has been like overemphasized, whereas we want maybe like the snap of the snare, not so much this like radio-ish presence in the snare. It makes it sound kind of like thin and maybe a little bit unnatural.
Could it be that I did not send you the right signals? Or maybe you just saw something that wasn't there.
So I would definitely be cutting a bunch of that out of the snare. Maybe bring in a little bit more low end on it as well. So I know I'm affecting the whole mix here, but I think we need to like fatten that snare out a bit, add a little bit of air to the top end. Doing a big cut here is going to do a bunch of this anyway. It's going to help bring it back to this shape.
I guess we really need to talk right now because I'm sorry what went down and that it was so embarrassing.
So there's a lot of sounds occupying this area at the moment. We've got that sort of scratchy guitar sound as well as the snare and even a bit of the vocals. So just be careful of this sort of like 2 kilohertz area. It feels like it's a little bit overrepresented in this mix.
Didn't tell you before, maybe should have, but didn't find the right moment. Could it be that I did not send you the right signals? Or maybe you just saw something that wasn't there. Because I really like the time we spent, and I'm sorry but I only thought of you as a friend. The time we spend, let's not pretend.
Something going on there with the drums that doesn't sound quite right.
The time we spend, let's not pretend.
Just a bit of a messy snare roll there. I don't know if it's something you can fix, but I'll definitely look at tightening that timing up. And if this is just like MIDI drums, maybe just quantizing that a little bit better.
The time we spend, let's not pretend was crazy. And I thought your mind became
Just overall, this whole section with the drums just feels like we just lost everything. So up to here is like really cool, and then the drums have just kind of like fallen down the stairs a little bit.
And you'll always be fine.
So something weird just happened there as well.
And you'll
Feels like the whole mix just got turned down. So I'm not sure whether that was done to try and create some dynamic, but it does sound really unnatural.
and you'll always be fine.
Definitely try and smooth that transition out just to keep it sounding really natural, flowing from there into this next section.
Be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated because you've spent all my time, but it's fine because we're friends, and you'll always be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated because you've spent all my.
This is really cool. I love that transition, and the drum fill in it sounds really cool. It's still just like that upper mids that's sort of grabbing me like around here. If that was tamed a little bit.
Friends, and you'll always be fine.
Mostly in the drum department, maybe even a little bit in the vocals. I feel like the guitars are kind of okay.
But oh my, I'm irritated.
Too much happening here between the snare and the guitar and the vocals.
I never thought I'd have that talk right now because I hoped to never have to put up with this ever again. And I don't know why you didn't tell.
Overall, the mix is feeling like a little too present, like up here.
Always be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated because you spent all my time, but it's fine.
I think if I was mastering this track, I'd be honing in around here just to kind of chill it out a little bit.
And you'll always be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated because.
And again, it's just to do with the drums being too present. It's creating a little bit of harshness, and it's just a little bit too bitey. We need a little bit of that low end kind of coming through, bumping it up a bit.
You spent all my time, but it's fine because we're friends. Always be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated.
Yeah, the other thing to do would either just be bringing out the low end and bringing out some air. So you can kind of approach it in two ways. Like if the mix sounds a little harsh, you can beef up your low end and you can beef up the bright toppy air end to take the focus away from those upper mids. Or you can work at sort of cutting things down to bring it back to a place that sounds a little bit better. And you're going to get kind of different results depending which way you go as well.
Always be fine, but oh my, I'm irritated because you spent all my time, but it's fine.
Like even that sounds pretty cool to me. So even if you kind of went about beefing up the low end of the mix, cutting some of those upper mids and the drums and the guitars even, and then just bringing out a little bit of air, sort of makes the mix feel a little bit more balanced. Let's have a listen to like how it started again.
I guess we really need to talk right now because I'm sorry what went down and that it was so embarrassing. I guess we really need to talk right now because I'm sorry.
You hear how like thin the snare sounds? It's just like, and that's the thing that like, grabs my ears when I first hear the track kick in. I'm like, that just doesn't sound quite right. So I know I've kind of picked it apart a little bit as we've gone and then kind of come to this conclusion closer to the end. But you could do it two ways. You could just work on cutting away some of those like upper mid frequencies that are creating this thinness to the mix, or you could try and beef it up a little bit, just bring out the kick and the bass a little bit more, as well as the low end of the snare, and then maybe adding a little bit of air to a few things like the cymbals, the snare, the vocals, and then even just doing a little cut around like guitars, cymbals, around sort of 4 to 3K. You're going to clean up those upper mids that sort of sound a little bit harsh, but kind of doing a combination of all these things across the mix should balance it out a little bit more, because we are really kind of like mid-range heavy around 2 to 4Ks where the focus of the mix is, and that's kind of like the harshest area of the mix as well. So we want to take the focus away from that enough that the mix sounds nice and full, but we don't lose that presence as well.
I guess we really need to talk right now, because I'm sorry what went down and that it was so embarrassing.
I know that's not perfect, but that's the general vibe I'm feeling, is the mix just needs a little bit of balancing across the EQ just to feel a bit nicer to listen to. It's a really cool song, and I think a couple little tweaks would just sweeten it up nicely. Hopefully I didn't confuse you there, but just a couple of ideas to try and sort of like tidy it up a bit.
And you'll always be fine.
And that little bass note, or maybe it's guitar, that's sort of like fading up into the impact, I'd maybe fade that kind of like quicker and sharper. So it sort of sounds like it peaks a little early and then just sort of sits there and then the band hits. Trying to just get that real ramp up. And so it's really exciting when it comes back in.
And you'll always be fine.
There's a weird snare at the end of this. While I've been listening to this, I've been trying to decide if this is MIDI drums or real drums with triggers. What it sounds like to me is this last snare hit has double triggered, or it's like a flam that's like too close together on the MIDI and it just sounds a bit phasey, and like it doesn't sound like a natural flam on the snare. The notes are too close together. And it's just a really obvious spot for something like that to happen because we're all focusing on the drums at that moment. So I'd probably look at cleaning that up if you can.
Because we're friends.
But yeah, hopefully that helps. Really cool song. Thanks for sending it in, and thanks to you guys for checking this out. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this, and hopefully you picked up some ideas along the way. Maybe it helped you in your critical listening. And if you guys disagree with any of the things I suggested, that's totally cool. This is just one person's perspective and opinion, and these are the things that I would sort of change if I was mixing the song. But obviously when you're mixing the song, you might want to do things a little differently. So take what you want, leave what you don't want. And I hope that you found it helpful, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed this type of video where we dive in and look at different mixes and sort of dissect them a little bit, check out this playlist where we're going to go back through a couple of the other episodes of viewer mix reviews.